Welcome to Table Talk, the Care Provider Solutions Show, where we do our best to encourage and enlighten and honor some of the most amazing people in the world, adult foster care home owners and managers. Today we have Tracy Smith from Macomb County. She is the CEO of Macomb County Mental Health, and Amy Leap, who is the owner of Comply, and of course, as you know, a co-coach here at Care Provider Solutions. We're happy you're here, all our members, and we hope that you're enjoying these shows and learning from them. As you know, a lot of things happen around a dining table in an AFC, in your AFC, and so we just thought it was appropriate to have our discussions about your mission, about your business, things that affect you around our dining table. You all know Nadine Carlson by now. She is the in-house coach along with Amy, and is here to lead the discussion today about corrective action plans and LARA citations, something that can be very emotional and stressful. So here's Nadine to lead the discussion today.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for coming, because this topic of corrective action plan, when I think about it, I remember the days of owning a facility and how the palms will get sweaty, the heartbeat starts racing, and then you have all these thoughts. Am I going to lose my license? Am I going to lose my contract with the community mental health? What's going to happen? And then you lose all this sleep and it gets really, really stressful. So today we wanted to go through the process to kind of relieve all that stress that goes along with it and talk about the simple process that can be followed so that it becomes just something that you know how to navigate through pretty quickly or pretty easily through the process that we're going to teach. So I would like to start with first of all, since you both come from different backgrounds, what are the similarities between community and mental health corrective action plans, which would come from Office of Recipient Rights, versus maybe a LARA corrective action plan?
Sure. From my understanding, and you can definitely speak more to LARA, is both have very specific regulations, right? Like you have to have certain criteria. If something occurs, you have to report it in a certain time frame, in a certain manner. So both CMH and LARA would have those criteria. Both would have the same foundation in the way that what occurred, like in your response, what actions you're going to take as an organization to remediate it, but also to take actions for either the home or the agency that it doesn't occur in the future again, essentially. And both will, of course, require you to have proof, right? Like show me you did that remedial action and what actions you might have taken. So that's my understanding of their similar foundation principles. And they both, the ORR, or the Office of Recipient Rights, of course, follows LARA regulations, right? So if there's a violation with LARA, it's going to be a concern from the ORR department, but they don't oversee someone's LARA license at all. If they had a concern that was related to licensing, they would only report it to LARA, and then LARA would look into that and take actions or not.
So that's interesting, because the complaints or the corrective action plans don't necessarily always come through LARA. They could be initiated through a resident, for instance, that feels like they're being unfairly treated in whatever method they define that. So then in that case, it would come through recipient rights.
Correct.
But the process would be similar to follow. Maybe the forms would be a little bit different, but the action plan would essentially be the same. Am I saying that right? Okay, wonderful. What do you think about any additional insight?
I would agree. I think there's more similarities than there are differences. I just think that the foundation of why you got the concern comes from two different places. So LARA's comes from the state of Michigan's regulations for adult foster care, and I believe CMH's comes from recipient rights.
Correct.
And
in the Michigan Mental Health Code, there's recipient rights regulations that are specifically outlined.
yes, similarities. They're both designed to correct non-compliance or violations, either of rights or of licensing rules. Documentation, they both require written plans outlining steps to remedy the issues. Both must be submitted within a specified time frame, usually days or weeks. Both are subject to review and possible follow-ups. Both can affect an agency's standing, either funding, license status, or reputation. And collaboration. Providers usually work with reviewing agencies, CMH or LARA, to develop the accepting corrective action plan. So the differences, let's see if we focus on the differences. I think we talked about this already. Yours is CMH, Office of Recipient Rights. Ones I mostly work with are LARA. Primarily rights violations, dignity abuse, neglect, confidentiality. Ours are mostly staffing, training, environment, documentation.
So as we get into this topic of corrective action plans, what I find is really interesting is in the adult foster care world, it can be defined in a lot of different ways. Well, in corrective action plans, it can be defined differently as well. So maybe you could both speak on that a little bit as to how it might be referred to.
It can be a performance action plan. It can be a plan of corrections. Basically, what it's stating is what was the concern? Like you just said, what are you going to do to remediate the concern? And I think you mentioned something about it being called something about a remediation plan.
It's the same. We would call it a remedial action plan, but if someone was having a conversation and they called it a corrective action plan, or they would understand the intent behind it, but the technical name in our world is remedial action.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And there are potential different formats that you're going to follow. You already talked about that. We're going to provide a copy of one that came from LARA, which is a very systematic way to work through how to write the corrective action plan, and I'll have you speak about that, Amy. And then if, in your case, if it's coming from the community of mental health, then your agency might have a form. Tell us a little bit about that compared to LARA's.
Sure. So for mine, there is a form. It's very, very basic, though. Again, the pattern is what occurred or what's the violation, right? And of course, either the case number or the violation that was referenced. The second part is what are you going to do as an agency or a home to prevent it in the future? So if it's for just one particular staff person, what is going to be done with that staff person? But as we know, sometimes if it occurs with one staff person, the assumption is others might not also know, and they also might need to be reminded or trained. So often we want you to explain what you're doing for that home or that agency to prevent that error in the future. And the last part is they traditionally ask you to kind of demonstrate proof that you did what you said. An example would be if an error occurred and you need to really retrain your staff or train your staff in a certain area, give us the proof that that training occurred would be an example of something. Or if somebody needed to be disciplined because they did make an error, then what was proof that that type of discipline was taken?
Interesting. So as you're developing these plans, what would you say some are the best practices to follow as you're creating the how compliance is going to be met and what discipline, if any, is going to occur and what training, if any, is going to occur? What have you found to be most helpful?
I think it needs to be plain in the way like who, when, where, when, why. Like what happened? When did you do something to correct it? What does that look like? And just answering the basic questions. We have really amazing providers in the state of Michigan. You already know the answers to the questions, right? It's just a matter of articulating it and demonstrating what you've done to correct it. And the staff at the CMHs are there to help. Remember, your success is their success. Or if you're not doing well, ultimately they're not doing well too. So even when you're not sure, ask them for what would you be looking for when we're responding to this remedial action. What does that look like from your perspective? And their goal should be to help you correct it so it doesn't happen again. I think you'll find ORR staff extremely compassionate, empathetic, and ultimately they're there, at least if they've been there for a while, because they want to make it the best home, in this case, for the people that live there.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I think the demonstrating can sometimes be the hardest part to complete. That, so that would be the what, in a sense, right?
Yeah, like let's say
Is-
the training would be an example. Like, when
Yeah.
did you do it? Who was there? How do we prove that that occurred? Or there was a disciplinary action for someone to make sure that they won't do it again. You'd have to prove.
So reaching out to the office to seek that guidance, what does that look like? Or
Yes.
in Amy, in your case, if you're helping with the corrective action plan, getting the insight from all your years of doing these, then it becomes less intense, I think.
Yes, yes. So for me, when I look at, if somebody was to send me a letter that they received and maybe there's 8 citations or 8 concerns from a consultant, whether it be CMH or whether it come from LARA, I like to start at the foundation of what the providers have already within their home. So if there's a concern with education, I like to start with policies. I like to say, what is your policy on how you train your staff currently? Let's look at that policy and see where it didn't work. Is there something we need to tweak within that policy to improve so that this doesn't happen again? Maybe they don't have a policy created and something fell through the cracks. Then we can create a policy based on some of the things that they're already doing, or we can add on that. Let's say they already had a really good policy, they just weren't following their policy. So then that's a little bit different. You need to find alternate ways for them to hold themselves accountable. And it's really thinking outside the box sometimes. Sometimes it's as easy as the person that is managing other employees didn't set it on their calendar that it's this day of the month that they've got to check the schedule to make sure anybody that month is due for CPR training, or they're due for a particular training that has to be done every month, or getting paperwork from OIG, like the things that have to be done monthly, the things that have to be done quarterly. Now, I know Care Provider Solutions has a great course that goes over all of those things and has a system built, but there are providers out there that haven't gone through those courses and are trying to navigate it on their own. And I think it can be really difficult keeping up with everything. And then if you end up getting a citation, trying to find where did it go wrong to fix that. Otherwise, you will be in the same place the following year when they come into your building, or if there's a concern with something, and you don't want to be a home that gets the same citation twice.
Yeah, provisional license is not something to take lightly when you have when you don't do it right after a first correction.
The next step is how you're going to prevent this occurrence from happening again. And you can do that in a multitude of ways, but a lot of the ways are initiating, if it was on education. Let's say you, some of your staff were missing some of the education that's required, and you then got them the education that they needed. But what are you going to put in place so that they don't miss that education again? Whether it's put in a policy, whether it's put into a process, but what are you going to do? And I think the more detailed you can be in this step, the better, because we're all human and we make mistakes, and you just don't want to make a mistake twice is how I see it. So I like to keep an audit binder in the home and make sure that if you received a citation on something, make sure that you're paying special attention to that. Yes, you have to audit all of the things that you routinely have to audit in the home, but also audit all of the things that you received a citation on until you feel 100% that it's now a fluid process and there won't be any mistakes on this new process. And sometimes it can be 3 months, and sometimes you're going to audit for a year because you really don't want to see that citation come up again.
That's
So-
really good advice.
It's amazing how many details a caregiver has to juggle in a day. So I have a lot of respect for caregivers that can do that.
Yeah, and if someone that's listening right now struggles with some of the things that you mentioned, Amy is a specialist for LARA citation. She can help you figure out what that process could look like so that you can follow through so it doesn't become repetitive. And then, like Tracy was saying, if it comes from recipient rights, then work with Office of Recipient Rights to help develop that process so that the stress level becomes much less.
Yes.
Yes.
Always a goal, isn't it?
Yep. And you know, when you add in the stress that we talked about in the beginning of how you feel when you get this list of or this one complaint, then how do you also manage the emotions? Because in addition to the sweaty palms and the sleepless nights, then you might be really angry, like, I can't believe I work my butt off and they still can't appreciate me for what I do. And the list goes on and on. So how does a provider just look at it as information instead of a personal attack?
I always say the same thing, which is, that is amazing that you're that upset, because what that says to me is you very much want to do the right thing, right? And that has to be very challenging to work every day really, really hard and know that you're doing this for the betterment of other humans, and you're just killing it, right? Like you're doing amazing, and then someone goes, oh, and it's something, sometimes it's something silly, right?
It is.
So that has to be angry. That would what it would cause me. It would make me sad. It would make me all the emotions. But I talk to them about, that's great. Now, how can we use that? Because that just means that you so much care about the success of your organization. So I think you almost have to acknowledge it. You almost have to acknowledge too, there is a high likelihood that at some point you're going to get a violation, right? Whether if you haven't, that's amazing and good for you. It's just not statistically likely that at some point somebody in your organization is not going to check the right box or forget to do something. We know that, and just sometimes you just have to take it for what it is. An error occurred. What are you going to do to fix it so it doesn't happen in the past? We even have our staff, the OR specialists or the kind of investigators, they have recipient rights substantiations because maybe they accidentally gave the wrong letter to the wrong person. Does that make sense? And they have the best reaction, and they're the most passionate about that subject, but they still make mistakes. So I would just acknowledge that having passion and being upset is a good sign, right? But then how can you change that emotion into preventing it in the future, and just acknowledging it will most likely happen.
I'd like you to add some of that too, because you've worked in many situations where emotions have made it presented an additional.
It's our perspective on how you're going to look at the situation. So as a provider, you can get upset, but that's not going to do anything positive about the situation. If you look at what you can do differently, even if you don't believe that you should have gotten it or you don't believe you got it correctly, look at that citation, look at what they stated happened, and try to remove the emotion from the situation. And we talk about that in the communication course, is how can you separate your emotion and just look at the data on the paper, because ultimately that's going to be what helps you be successful, is trying to remove the emotion from the situation, look at the data, and fix what needs to be fixed. And you're the best person to do that.
Right.
And how you respond to that situation, particularly in front of your other team members, is going to say a lot about the
point.
culture in your home. People are overthinking things. They can make it more complicated than it really is. because of their emotions. So I think it's figuring out, it's not going to be in this table talk, but when you get emotional, how does your body respond? Are you able to think clearly? What do you do when a consultant is in your home and tells you that, oh, your controlled substances aren't double locked? Like, how does that make you feel? Some people get so frazzled by somebody pointing something out wrong that everything that consultant said after they said that, they didn't even hear or didn't, really, it's our emotions that really, play a huge part in this, I think.
Sometimes it seems like we view these corrective actions as coming from the law, as a police officer stopped by with handcuffs ready. And that's not it at all. We've heard from Stacy, it's not that way at all.
I can appreciate though, and I can appreciate that's my personality. If you tell me I did something wrong, I'm reading every word, and I can appreciate the fact that you almost should have a little bit of a reaction of some sort, right? Because if you don't, that makes me wonder, right?
Yeah. So, and I didn't want to jump in when you said, don't question it, don't say it didn't happen, but it's possible, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
That somebody made something up?
It's possible. In our world, they have preponderance of evidence. So I'm going to give you an example. So if you said Nadine did something and Nadine said she didn't do it, but no one else witnessed it, unless I've got other evidence, right, outside of that, that's going to be challenging for me to substantiate as a generality. But don't forget, I can get other evidence.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So there is a preponderance of evidence that still has to occur. It's not going to be the same as the court. It's not going to be the same. Everybody follows different rules that maybe LARA follows, but just know that if someone said you did something and it didn't occur, if you have altering information that you could share, right, that would demonstrate something different, you can share it.
Okay.
But I would definitely share it when they're doing the investigation, right? Because then, unless you just can't get to it, right? Speak up as they investigate, not don't wait.
Because when you get the letter, they've substantiated that you are in non-compliance. So they have enough evidence.
Yes.
They saw enough to say you've received the citation. That's not when you should say, well, you didn't ask me. I could have showed you this, this, and this. When they're in your home and they say they have a concern with something or they're looking into something, that's when you say, oh, I see what you're looking at. I have this, this, and this I can show you also. It's not after they've already
No, during the
substantiated.
investigation, share that. And a common misnomer is, I can only speak for Macomb, but the majority of investigations are not substantiated. Everybody thinks that that's not true. It's less than 50% that ultimately get substantiated.
Oh.
So they investigate a ton and the end result is not substantiated. Now there are times in which that error probably did occur, right? But they don't have enough preponderance of evidence to substantiate that.
Oh, okay.
So
Goes both
again, I
ways.
think it does go both ways, but I'm always surprised that people don't realize that the majority for Macomb, and I think that's a generality, but at least in Macomb is they do not get substantiated.
And I look at, I've written more plans of correction for LARA. I particularly feel like CMH would be more difficult. LARA is you meet the regulation or you don't meet the regulation. To me, it's more black and white. Does the door need to be 2 inches? Is the door 2 inches? Do your staff need this training? This is the list of the training. These are the dates they did it. Did they do it? Did they not do it? Yeah. It's very black and white, where I think in your world, it's digging into who said what? How did they say it? When did they say it? What were the body language like?
Yeah,
all
what was the
of
posture?
that.
Yep.
All of
It could be
those
down
things.
to somebody didn't give them the second snack that they said they wanted, or they wouldn't give them their cigarettes. It could be something which to the average person goes, well, okay, maybe they shouldn't eaten that second snack. Well, yeah, but that's not the role you play for them. So if they want to eat a second snack, They can do that. Or if they want to hang out in the kitchen all day long, and I know that might be frustrating you because maybe it's literally causing a challenge for you, but they can do that, right? Like whatever you can do in your own home, they have the ability to do. So some of the things that we run into are just you might think it's okay, but the foundation of the system of care is whatever that human can do in their own home, unless they have a behavioral treatment plan that prevents them from doing something, whatever you can do, they can do. Yeah, it's hard, but I get it. The babysitting example is the best one from my perspective, and the way that someone, if you had a child, and the example, like we've had this where the child was kind of running over here into the parking lot, right? Well, technically, if you're babysitting, you would just pick up the kid, right? Well, if you pick up the kid and then they say you restrained them, did you restrain him? You did. Did you have a treatment plan saying you could restrain him? No, but doesn't that feel common sense that I'm going to go do this?
Keep this child safe.
Right.
Yes, yes, but there's this it's just you have to almost have the foundation of what environment you're in and the role you're playing in that particular scenario is not the same, in my example, is babysitting, right? So what does that mean? What do you have the ability to do, and what rights does that person have that maybe you're just not thinking through?
When we met you the other day at Scaling Up, you seemed to be so caring, so empathetic toward caregivers or owners, people responsible for other people. You know that they care about the resident just like you do. And I was impressed by how you explained your feelings about residents and caregivers too. If you would review that a little bit, I think it would be encouraging for our members.
Sure. First, thank you. That's like the most amazing compliment ever. I think that I would explain it in the way that ultimately whether you look at it like statewide, whether you look at it community-based, every single provider is essential for the success of whether it be the CMH, LARA, at the end of the day. I'm sure you guys can attest, but people don't go into this profession, and more importantly, stay in this profession,
Right.
unless they naturally do care about
Right.
it's. You don't stay in this, right? We all know you don't stay in for the money. We don't stay in. We stay in it because we want to make a big difference. And I think that we don't often, as a system of care, express our appreciation for the providers, especially the medium to small providers. Those are the providers that on a regular basis go just above and beyond for the people, right? Because again, they're doing it because they want to make a big difference traditionally in the community that they also reside. So I just think that we as a system need to acknowledge them even more and help them grow so they can provide the best level of care. We do have amazing large providers. I don't want to take away from them, but there's something to be said about a provider who lives in kind of is in the same geographic area that they are providing services.
That's
Thanks.
good insight. So let's say we get a complaint and we complete the corrective action plan and maybe it's not accepted. Is there any appeal process that can be incited or asked for?
Yes, and through LARA, a lot of the consultants will help you make the adjustments necessary so that your corrective action plan is accepted. They're there to help you. We're all on the same team. We want to make sure that the residents in the home are getting excellent care. So it's not we have to turn it into them and they're either going to okay or I don't know, sign off that it's not okay. They may say back, hey, what do you really mean by this? Or are you doing this? What's your follow-up if they need more information? Is it similar?
Absolutely. So let's say you did submit a corrective action and they said, well, this is not acceptable. They will traditionally give you why it's not acceptable. And I would encourage you to reach out to them, have a conversation. Don't just go by maybe an exchange of email, because that's where things can get lost in definitely in translation, especially if you're already feeling those emotions or defensiveness in that. In addition to that, so there is the whole process of I don't understand and coming to a collaborative agreement about the corrective action. But let's say you do submit a corrective action or you don't just agree with the outcome. You think I don't agree that it's substantiated. Every CMH has the ability for somebody to file an appeal. They have a recipient's rights committee that essentially would meet, and they have the ability to kind of share why they don't agree with the outcome. Now, taking that action might or might not change the end result, but they do have the ability to do that. And I know many times when they do that, if let's say the provider brings forth additional evidence or information about the situation that wasn't previously known to that, there's been multiple times where they then looked into it again, right now that they have this other piece of information. So again, you can appeal it. Sometimes it ends up being at the same level of substantiation, but I've seen it also where maybe some of the substantiations are maybe removed because you provided additional evidence. But I would highly recommend you start with, you can always appeal formally, but I would highly recommend you immediately interact with them, right? Because again, they ultimately just want the home to be providing excellent care just like the providers want to do.
So does that happen before you write the corrective action plan, or that comes after when you get the feedback that you would request?
A formal appeal would be after, but like to have an interaction, like the day you got the accusation, you in theory could reach out to them and go, hey, I don't agree, what do I do? How do I respond to this? Or you then submit your response that's due within a certain amount of time, and let's say they don't agree, the ORR individual could reach out and say, hey, we don't agree, here's why we don't agree, and you could have a collaborative conversation about that. Because remember, they have to have, on the ORR side, they have to have a conclusion, right, that's going to meet criteria, right? So they want to help you get to meet that criteria because they're required to get
So I
to
keep
that.
on hearing from both of you, communication is the key. Not locking down and getting absorbed in all the thoughts that can come along with this. It's just being open to share in some of the ways that you were talking about, Amy, is maintaining that professional, neutral tone.
Yes, absolutely. Communicate and collaborate. Really, we're all on the same team, and it's trying to figure out what they need, when they need it by, and making sure that you are taking the emotion out of how you're communicating on paper and verbally. Making sure that everything really remains professional and that you both are there for the betterment of the people that you care for.
I think that's the heart of it, really. Is this what we're talking about right now? It's not so much the process, just checking out, filling in the boxes. It's about the actual response and how to manage that.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, we're all in it for the same reason, which is to help the community, right? So on the other side, they have really hard jobs too. People who are coming out, whether it be LARA or whether it be ORR, and they're not doing it they're not getting anything out of, like, they don't get rewarded for substantiation or, right? In fact, it actually causes more work for them. So just kind of recognizing that they're there to complete a task, and they're ultimately, these rules and regulations were created, right, for the betterment of the people we serve. So just recognizing the starting point and the motive, and again, they don't gain anything by having a negative outcome. And then ask questions, right? Be collaborative,
Yes.
communicate, and assume that you both have the same end goal, which is to make the system of care for the people we serve the best.
So that's almost a good launching point to then how do we translate that to our staff so that they're motivated to want to make sure that corrective action plan sticks and that there is long-term follow-through and that there's not a repeated offense. Any thoughts on that?
I think you almost have to acknowledge the emotion. Your team members are going to be upset, right? They're not, nobody likes to get in trouble, for lack of better words, right? But I think it's taking that and kind of acknowledging to them, I understand why you're upset. I would be upset. So that's great. Let's use that emotion, right, that you're feeling, and look at what can we do to prevent it in the future? How can we educate others? Because if you made this mistake, there's a high likelihood that somebody else is going to make the same mistake. So engage them and have them be part of that solution. So it's not just a piece of paper that here, sign this saying you got this new policy update, right? Talk about what happened, and then to be fair, get their perspective. Maybe they, to your point, maybe they didn't agree, but either way, the end result is still the same, right? So here's our situation. How can we move forward, and just express your appreciation for their reaction, because that is actually a good sign. You don't want a team member who has zero reaction, right? Because that's
They don't care.
Yeah, right.
And I think the culture in the home, the more it is, when you are a provider, if you look at a barrier or a site or a problem, whatever you want to call it, as a person problem, this person made a mistake, this person didn't do something right, it's typically not a person problem, it's typically a process problem. What is our process for passing medication? When do we sign the MAR? What is our process when we get medications from our pharmacy? What does our policy say we do? I'm going to always go back to policies.
Okay.
What does our policy say our process is? So I think it's recognizing that a lot of times it's not a person problem, it's a process problem, does help manage some of the emotions and things.
That's really, really good insight. And I'd like to highlight how that kind of folds in real nicely with including the staff to help improve that process. So even if the person was called out for doing something inappropriately or wrong, according to the standards, they can still create the solution. So then ultimately everyone else is motivated because they've helped. They weren't dictated to.
Yeah. And I can give you a recent one I read where it was a medication error, and everybody goes, oh, medication error. That is a serious thing, right? But this particular individual took out the medication, something fell on the ground, they bent over to pick it up. By the time they came back, another resident had taken the medication. And it was a split second, right? Is that a medication error? Yes, it is. But it was a process, like you have to keep the medication secured at all times. And they immediately reported themselves, right? They immediately took the right action. They called poison control. They did everything they were supposed to do. But the end result was still a substantiated medication error. But what a great team member to immediately take action. And then that they did engage and figure out what can we do, what exactly happened, and what can we do in the future.
Is medication the most common error?
Not from mine. I don't know, but it is common, but it's not the most common. No,
Okay.
The most common are like dignity and respect, like what somebody says to somebody, right? And because ultimately you shouldn't be raising your voice to somebody. You shouldn't be saying. That's probably the most common one that we see.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's another example of dignity and respect is how would you want to be treated? So is it okay for you to yell at your family member? Sure. But these aren't your family members, right? So in other words, I think there's just for the newer team member learning that it's not the same dynamic. Or can you pick up a child when you're babysitting them? Yes, but you're not their babysitter in this situation. Does that make sense? People just don't think through. So sometimes they'll get a substantiation that it is a substantiation. You were in error, but what they do in other situations, you can't do in this environment. That's just this environment is different than when you're, in my example, babysitting. And that's not they're not wrong. It's just in this environment, there's different rules.
And then it's adapting the process to
Yes.
meet the rules. So then ultimately everyone succeeds.
They're not there to just point out what we're doing wrong. They're there for their job to make sure that the recipients in the home are getting the care that they need. And it's all written down. We all have access to the same information. So it's taking the personalization out of it and saying, oh goodness, that's violation 400.12. Let me look that up because I want to do better. I want to do it right. And most people want to do it right.
I agree.
I mean,
Absolutely. So the process is simple. So how do we go about navigating that process? You have a really cool way and a really neat approach of how to do that. Could you unpack that for us real quick?
sure. So I think what we have here is just making sure that if you have it in you, that you acknowledge the receipt respectfully. When you get your letter, try to read it in a calming space. Don't try to read it when you're trying to do multiple other things. I think taking that time and really reading through what the concerns were in a place where you can take some deep breaths and really be open to hearing that what they're talking to you about is not a personal attack on you or your home. It is not meeting the standards that were set for you. And how you can do that is just by starting with concise, factual statements when you're writing your plan of correction. You're not stating things, you're not giving blame for what happened, you're not justifying what happened, and you're not using emotionally charged language when you're writing your plan of correction. It is really restating what they found and then going and breaking down what are you going to do to fix it. And that's really, am I correct, what you're looking for?
Correct.
Yeah. So you just want to identify it, what actions need to be taken or will be taken, the timeline for when you're implementing this, and how your effectiveness will be monitored. And a lot of times you're going to monitor effectiveness by auditing. And what an audit is looking at what needed to be corrected and putting that on a document, whether it's handwritten or typed up, and how often you need to make sure that it's correct. So if the regulation requires that you're doing something monthly, you want to make sure that on your form, you have every month of the year on the form, and you're going to look and make sure that it's correctly completed every month. And then you're going to initial, or you're going to assign somebody to initial that they double checked it and it's correct, because you don't want to get the same citation twice.
We kind of compared this idea to a police officer stopping you in your car, which obviously in our culture could have huge ramifications for some people over others. We all know that. But in this case, we've talked about how you're not guilty before proven guilty. It is not a law situation. It is, it is in the end, it is backable by laws that created these rules, but it's not like going to court. It's something where you can actually cooperate and you can work toward the better of your home and the care of your residents. On the other hand, we are here to raise the bar on care. Now, we are treating this as if all our caregivers have the best motives and the best abilities and the best minds for the job. So we are saying that we're all cooperating toward the betterment of the resident, but we also don't want to forget why these rules are here, why they're put in place. Would you address that?
Yeah, there are people who make poor decisions and do bad things. There are people who do bad things to other humans. Otherwise, those laws and regulations wouldn't exist in the first place. So keeping in mind that, again, the starting point might be good, and you might find yourself in the way that one of your team members did something wrong to somebody else. And what's really important if you find yourself in that situation is to take immediate and swift action, right? Because it speaks volumes about you. It speaks volumes about your organization if somebody did harm in some way another human being, because that's really hard to recover from if you don't take immediate action. And again, make sure it's very diligent, it's swift, and it's very thorough, because that also sends a message to not just a CMH who you might be involved with, but everybody who works in your organization, your community, whatever that is.
The families of the
Yes, yes.
And I think, just to reiterate, we're talking about writing corrective action plans. And there's really, really important reasons why you have to write one. It may seem simple. The top of a garbage can wasn't on, meds weren't locked up, things like that. But when you look at why that regulation is in place, It's because it can cause danger to the individuals that we care for. And when you look at the end result, let's say you write a corrective action plan and you said you were going to audit, and then things happen. You weren't auditing, or you thought the people that you assigned to audit were auditing, but there wasn't follow-up making sure that they were doing that. And then all of the sudden there's somebody at your door, and let's say it was because of not having controlled substances double locked. And you just got pharmacy delivery, and the meds were sitting on top of the med cart, and you had somebody at the door coming to view the home, and you didn't immediately put those meds away. What happens, or what could you be liable for by not having things in place again? There could be significant licensure things happening. They can suspend your license, they can put you on probation, they can revocate your license. And so you really, when we talk about auditing, there are real ramifications for not doing what you say you're going to do in your plan of correction. Yes, it's very simple to write the plan of correction, but what matters is that you follow up and you're holding everyone accountable for continuing to do the right thing. So I just wanted to specify that. It's easier to write it and to get it approved. The harder part of a plan of correction to me is making sure that whatever process you put in place, that you're holding yourself and your staff accountable to making sure that it's continuing to be done correctly.
Yeah, that's really important. And from a community and mental health perspective, a revocation of license wouldn't be within your empowerment, but would it look like for repeated offenses from ORR?
So if someone did lose their license, they would not be able to be contracted as a group home provider or specialized residential, more specifically with us, right? Like you have to have that. Or if let's say you wanted to get a contract with the CMH, because maybe you weren't working with them, if there's something on your record that is going to impact the decision moving forward for that organization. As far as repeat citations, it definitely is the type of citation or the type of outcome that was violated, the frequency of it, but also the repetitive lack of correction, right? Like in other words, I say in my remedial action, I'm going to do this, and then it doesn't get any better. Well, our statement, what you did is not affecting, and it might be something as simple as you were suggesting. Maybe I planned on doing that, but then I got distracted from it, so then I kept on having the same thing. But a repeated level of a citation can ultimately impact your contract, and it does cause us concerns. But again, it's going to be based on the severity of the action. Was someone harmed? And then, of course, the number that it occurs over time with. Like one of our most common ones is training. They're not completing their training on time. And we, of course, take that seriously because in theory, if someone's not properly trained, accidents, bad things happen. But we also understand that does occur, and sometimes it's short. They're missing it by a few days. So I think just to reiterate, sometimes things we take lightly, training being an example, right? It's the concept that the lack of that could lead to something bigger. So even though it's minor maybe in someone's view, know that was put in place, whether it be the law, the regulation, or training, to prevent something really bad from happening.
Like, I think people just they don't make good decisions or don't prioritize correctly.
Or kind of lack of knowledge. Like I have an example of one that was like this really good provider, amazing provider for many years. The owner fell ill and wasn't available to do some task. Well, that particular person was really the administrative function of it, so they did all the checks and balances. In a very short period of time, that same provider that was outstanding, the checks and the balances from an administration thing went away. Well, then that's when they were billing things they shouldn't have been. That's when they weren't recording it. Now, to be fair, they probably provided the service, but they also didn't record it properly, right? So, and very quickly, in a matter of 6 to 9 months, that particular provider was in a very different situation, and all was because someone was not checking all the right boxes and validating and whatever. So I would also encourage a provider to say, I know it's hard when you're small, but is there more than one person that can do these checks and balances? What's the backup system? Because if you're dependent on one person and that one person is not available, now what, right? I would hate that your business doesn't do well because you've created this one solution for this one situation.
It's an
Yeah.
excellent thing to think through. And that takes some extra thought,
It does.
especially if you're a single home provider
Yes. What
and
does
you're
that
trying
mean?
to do everything.
And I get it because there's only so many hours in the day,
Right.
but it's like you guys have heard of like running any business, right? They'll say, well, if somebody gets hit by the bus, now what, right?
Right.
It's that same principle in this scenario. So you providing direct care and the human interaction is extremely important. Like, right, if you try to simplify it, that's important. But as you guys know, if you don't properly bill for it or record it or whatever, it doesn't matter how amazing that care was, right? Because you're not going to get credit, you're not going to get paid, or you're going to get a violation. So it's somewhere where people understand paperwork is annoying, but is the reality of your
It's a
life.
necessary evil.
It is. It
Yeah.
just is what this is. So helping, I think sometimes staff in all of our industry go, oh, like I have to do so much paperwork. But you're like, but this is my life. It didn't happen unless I did do this properly. So maybe just trying to make sure people understand the care is important, but this is your reality of the world that you live in, and you have to do those things also, and they're almost just as important.
And with the fast-paced technology is developing, there's opportunities to
Yes.
explore how that can help with these processes so that it's not just about doing the paperwork. You do have time to do the care, which is ultimately the goal of the facility.
Excellent discussion, and we appreciate having you here to talk about it, Tracy and Amy. You've both given up time today from your busy schedules and traveled, and we appreciate that. We couldn't think of anybody better to talk about this today, and so we're really glad you could be here. And of course, our members can discuss this topic all they want in the Mastermind membership in the community. It's there for you to discuss to your heart's content with your fellow AFC owners and managers. Of course, Nadine is always excited to support you with courses, one-on-one, in person or online, and reduce your business stresses and your struggles. Ask anybody who has worked with her and they will tell you she's an excellent coach. This is one of the best ways, we think the best way, for you to fulfill your ongoing state-required educational requirements. So make sure you print out a certificate to prove that you watched the show with us. Our hope here at Care Provider Solutions is that you never lose that passion that you had when you thought about starting this business and when you started it, to care for residents. We hope that you don't let stress or confusion rob you of your joy or your passion or your commitment. Thanks for watching.